Thank you so much for tuning into the show, and welcome to Season 2 of the Audiobook Club with John York. The Audiobook Club, partnered with Pro Audio Voices, celebrates audiobooks, the amazing people and teams who make them happen, as well as the various talents behind storytelling. To learn more about Amplify and other opportunities to grow your sales, platform, and audience, head over to proaudiovoices.com and listen out for a short but informational advertisement within this episode. Let's start the show. Hello and welcome to the Audiobook Club. In this week's episode, we're so lucky to be joined by actor and audiobook narrator Stephen Dexter. Stephen, it's such a joy to have you on the show, mate. How are you?
Good. I'm great. Such a joy to be here. Thank you, John.
Oh, thank you for coming on. It was such a pleasure meeting you and hanging out with you at APAC last month. I just feel like, how was your overall experience at APAC?
I had a great time. It's definitely overwhelming, and it definitely there's a lot of nerves for me, a lot of anxiety like leading up to it. I think especially this year being the first one back completely in person,
Mm,
because the last one I went to was 19. Yeah. So it was, it was a little bit over jarring, and it was a different venue. They did it at the Javits Center, which is this big glass structure on the west side, and so to do it at the hotel was much more kind of confined. But I thought that they still did a great job. It ran very smoothly, and once I got there, and once you start meeting everybody, and once you kind of get into the groove of everything, and the going into the workshops and stuff like that, I really started to kind of relax a little bit. But definitely when I first got there, and it's difficult because they I don't know, there's something about the way that I don't know if you noticed the way they do the name tags,
yeah.
where your first name is huge and then your last name is small, but the last name is the one that I really like. No, I understand why they do it, so you can quickly look down, "Oh, boom, that's your hi, John. Hi, Steven. Hi, da, da, da."
Yeah.
But when it's trying to, like, figure out, because this is just like you, like, this is one of the few events, if not the only event, where I have, at least for me, where I have the opportunity to meet people that I work with many times in person, because
Mhm.
we do this job so, by ourselves for the most part. So I always look forward to, like, oh my God, I'm actually gonna meet so and so, or I'm gonna, see and people change their looks and things like that, or they use pseudonyms, and so there were a lot of times where people would come up to me and I wouldn't know who it was,
Mm,
because I'm used to them using their pseudonym, especially, being predominantly like a romance narrator. And
yeah.
um but then also, like, I seeing somebody and, like, oh my God, or I know their face. I know that name just from social media and things like that. And then just feeling like that obligation, not in a bad way, but like making a mental note of, like, I have to say hi to that person. I have to go to, like, that person has posted, if they're like influencer people,
Yeah.
who also double as, like, narrators and things like that. Like, I have to make sure that I say hi and say thank you for everything that if they've promoted books that I've done, or books that we've done together. But and then obviously and then meeting new people, like you. It was so great to meet you, and a lot of other people, um and that usually, that usually happens towards the end,
Yeah.
where you kind of, like, once the open bar open where you're like, wow, and then you go out afterwards, and that was a lot of fun too. Because it's just such a supportive, welcoming community. And I think because of the isolated, singular nature of the work that we do, even though we're all
Yeah.
still actors, plus the fact that we don't see each other very, very often. um it's just like people, it's like this pent up, like, extreme desire to, like, oh my God, and then you don't want it to end.
Yes.
um
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, it was a wonderful time, and it was definitely much better than the first time, and even the second time, because I've grown and I've progressed in my career and everything like that. So the more, the more people it kind of makes it easier. You're not so much in that not I feel like shark mode is but you're not in that
Mm.
like I have to meet everybody. It's more like I'm meeting you because we've worked together as opposed to, oh, I have to, and how do I approach that person and not make it seem like I need something or I want something from them.
Yes.
But you just learn that like it's all about and I learned this from the first time I went is that it's just about being a nice person and having that kind of relationship as opposed to here's my business card and let's work
Yeah.
together. It's just like, hey, I like your shirt.
Yeah, I get it's a weird one because I think for there's a maybe a kind of idea that for actors and things we can be very outgoing people, whereas quite often that's not the case, and we can be quite these events can be incredibly daunting and the rest of it. Did you have like what was your approach to coming to something like APAC? Do you have like a game plan as it were, or are you more just I will just see how it goes?
It's a little of both. Because there were people that obviously it is, it's not the cheapest thing in the world. There are other
Mm.
ways that you could save money and
Yeah.
hang out with people. So I do look at it as it's a business event, and it will offer these opportunities for me to connect with people that either to nurture relationships with publishers and potentially authors or other narrators that I've already worked with, or
Hmm.
to reach out to new ones like the rep from Macmillan that I met. Like I've done a couple Macmillan books, but again, it's like there's nothing that can substitute, and this is in email chains and things like that, even social media, nothing that can replace just how important that face-to-face time is.
Yeah.
So it was great to meet Steve from Macmillan, and also to kind of re kind of establish the fact that when you can kind of, especially in the audiobook world, get pigeonholed a little bit into a certain genre, I really like to
Mhm.
use these events to once again like begin to expand, and it's almost like you're starting fresh. Like you can say, I have these titles, I have these accolades and things like that. However, like when I was meeting with the rep from Macmillan, I was like, these are the books that I like to read recreationally. These are the things I would like to do more of.
Yeah.
So it offers that kind of the chance to do that. But then also the panels, the things that the things that are actually scheduled were very, very informative and great ways to uh learn and to grow and to find out what is going on in all these different areas of the industry.
Yeah.
Uh both from the performative and from the technical, and then from just the rumblings of the AI and shifts and the how it's doing financially and that kind of
Mm.
stuff, projections and stuff, just because it's interesting to know and to be abreast of all of that. Um and also, yeah, and then going to these panels and listening to these people talk, that in itself offers a way to like connect, and because they usually would leave their contact information, and then you can reach out and say, wow, I'd really like to know more about that, or I'd love to work with you. um and everybody
Yeah.
again was just so knowledgeable and so wonderful when it came to wanting that kind of like welcoming that kind of conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I found that very I think I had a very similar experience with you. Is I think like once my nerves had calmed, and the drinks towards the end definitely helped with that. But I think once my nerves had calmed down, I was sort of allowed myself to be fully present and almost sort of forget about myself and start to take in what was around me. I found it so valuable, and even though it was quite pricey, especially if you're traveling, across state or in my case internationally to that, I really found that it was worth it. Just, I mean, also just for like the experiences of meeting with your colleagues that you'd only ever know over email or social media, and being able to put faces and personalities to names that you know so well. I think I took away that as being a really joyous experience.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I mean that, that like again, that's the first year that I went. I remember people telling me, because I had, I had a few, I think I had maybe 15 books the first time that I went in
Yeah.
2018. And I had made some good, there were like actor friends that I had worked with, people that I knew from like theater or film and TV that I'd or friends of friends, and so I kind of like leaned on them. Like I told them I'm going to my first APAC, and if there's any
Hmm.
helpful hints. And every single person, publisher, narrator, was like the real, um not deals, but like the relationships are made in between the panels,
Mm.
like in the hallways, they said. And I was like, oh, but I don't really know anybody, and things like, and I was kind of like, I really got to stick to this schedule. Because at that time I did really, there was a lot that I didn't know. There still's a lot I don't know, but because it's constantly changing. But at that time especially, so you kind of get torn, because the other thing, and I'm sure you saw this as well, is that there are these, these little clusters of conversation, and sometimes there are people on the outside,
Yeah.
and you can feel their energy of like they want to come in, they want to talk, and you want to open it up and let them in. But then there's that weird, like, but I haven't seen this person in so long, and we're really engaged in a, real, like, catching up conversation, because a lot of times it wasn't even about the work. It was just, I had a breakup, I had it was just
Yeah.
like the personal side. And but then you're like, oh, because I remember being that person just a few years ago, and being like, I just want to talk to people, I just want to get to know people. um so that kind of helped to inform that, like, I learned it was okay to do that, within reason. You don't want to be obnoxious about it, but I learned that from that first year. And so then when you're kind of fortunate enough to be on the inside of those clusters, to be have that awareness, that, like, oh, there's some, this person looks like they really want to come in. So I was always kind of like half like waiting for that little opportunity, that little lull,
Yeah.
in the conversation, because I don't want to interrupt if somebody's really like, oh, it's been a tough year. Oh, you know what? Hold on a second. Hi, I'm Steven. Like, you don't want to do that, but like waiting for a moment where it's like, oh, okay, this has kind of organically come to a resolution. And so now we
Yeah.
can, this topic has resolved itself, and now we can maybe bring this person in. Because I don't know, I just feel it could be going back to like all my childhood. Like, you don't want to like be
Yeah.
ostracized. You don't want to feel like, oh, I'm ignoring you, and
No.
hell with you. I don't know who you are, so you're not gonna come in here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a skill in itself, and I think there's many of us, of course, who have that sort of fear of being the one eating your lunch on your own, and I think that the thing that I found, and I literally was eating my lunch on my own at APAC for the first 30 seconds, and then before Jess Nahikian caught me, and then like marched straight over and said, "No, you're having lunch with us," and I was like, "Oh, this is such a lovely little like community." Yeah, it was wonderful. I'd love to know how you got started acting. Like when did you first sort of realize this is something that I really want to give a go?
I mean, it was incredibly joyful for me from a very early age. I I'm pretty sure that the seed, excuse me, was planted when I was in kindergarten,
Mm,
and we were doing there was like this presentation, because I went to a Catholic school just for kindergarten. It was weird, and then I think the school dissolved, but it was only for K through second grade, and it was
mm,
through the church that, my family and I were parishioners at, were members of. And um so I went there for kindergarten, and we had decided that we were going to do a pageant. I guess I wouldn't even call it a
mm.
play, of Ghostbusters. Uh, and we had like script. We had things like written down. I think we were basically gonna do this first or second movie. I don't know. Excuse me. And we had like props and things like that. And we had rehearsals. And then when it came time to present, the kindergartners were going to present to the first and second grade classes. I completely forgot all my I think I was playing the Bill Murray character. I think I was playing Peter Venkman, and I completely forgot all of my lines and ended up just riffing and just improvising.
Yeah.
And I think because at that age, you just don't have those inhibitions that everybody else um was like, all right, Steven has completely thrown his script away, so I think we're gonna just roll with it. And it was where
Yeah.
the director, and I feel so bad for her because she I think she was like trying to shout the real lines, trying to get me back on track. But I just was running with this idea and what was happening in the moment. And then my friends in the cast as well, and the first and second grade class was howling with laughter. And I think that was the oh my god, like the power that I had,
Yeah.
and the joy that I was bringing them, and just how excited it made me. That was when it really started. And then I was always very, very, you know, big and dramatic, and love to be the class clown and the center of attention. And so, for a long time, much to the chagrin of a lot of my teachers, it was about being the cut up in class.
Yeah.
And I always walked that fine line of like I wasn't. Uh, I mean, I justified it as like I wasn't disrespectful. I wasn't a bad kid in air quotes, but I was disruptive in the sense that like I was always making jokes and doing things behind my teacher's back and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
so I did get into some trouble, and that went all the way through high school. But then there was like community theater in my town. And uh so I did, because the only thing that they were offering were musicals. And I had been in
Mm.
the choir and things like that at school, so I knew how to sing. And uh but that's more, you're kind of learning on the fly. There was no formal acting education or anything like that.
Yeah.
um Getting up into high school, that was where it was more like, improv. I was a member of drama club, and we did a couple shows. We did a comedy or my senior year that, like, once again, it was like a bookend to kindergarten, where we had one of those shows that the high schools always do. I think this one was called Here Comes the Judge, which it's really cheap to get the rights to.
Mm.
And the other thing is that because it's such a lesser known show, I mean, we totally went wild with the improv. We basically ended up just keeping the framework of the plot, just so there were some boundaries,
Yeah.
but everything else was just so improvised, and it was different every single night. And by the end, it started to get a little too extreme because you feel like you got to top yourself. If one friend in the cast did this, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna get an even bigger laugh tomorrow
Yeah.
night with this. And because we had a teacher that was so, it's high school drama, so we weren't fortunate enough to have like an actual somebody who was trained in drama. So I feel like, especially in a lot of public schools, you get the English teacher,
Yes.
who's the closest thing, because you're learning, you're working on plays and stuff like that, and poetry and things like. It's the closest to the performing arts. And we had a teacher who was just, if it made him laugh, then we kept it.
Yeah.
uh and then it was when I got into college that I had to kind of make the choice of, what do I, obviously, what do I want my major to be. The only
Mm.
other big decision before then was, because I played baseball for a really, really long time. Um and the older you get and the more serious you get about a sport, the more time it takes, like
Of
most
course.
things,
Yeah.
because you're like.
Yeah.
And I was really, really developing as like a starting second baseman, and I was batting, I think, like first or second in the order. And because I was going through this, was like at about 15, 16. So my body was changing. I was getting more muscle. I was getting faster. And because I'd been playing baseball for over a decade, like organized league ball, I came to a crossroads one summer when I was 15 or 16, where it was like, now do you try out for the high school team, which is then a huge commitment, or do you do like the summer traveling league?
Mm.
Again, huge commitment, and it kind of came down to a summer traveling league team or doing a play. And even then, I knew that like this is bigger than just like, this year I'll do a play, or I'll
Yeah.
do a play, and next year I'll play. But this was like, this is gonna be, I think subconsciously, this is gonna be the end of my baseball career. Which was something that I had kind of entertained along with some other, marine biology and chemist,
Yeah.
storm chaser. I really, really for some reason love tornadoes. A baseball player, professional baseball player, and um, that was when I made the choice to say, no, I think I'd like to do, guys and dolls this summer as opposed to going on the road with, the
Yeah.
Babe Ruth league. And yeah, I never played organized baseball again, like league ball. Not that I regret it at all. I mean, it's fun, I go back to like batting cages and stuff like that. I played
Yeah.
softball on the Broadway league uh a few games when I could, and it's like, riding a bike. It all comes right
Yeah.
back. But it really wasn't until I got to college that I really saw just how serious and how difficult this was, because that was like the first time that I got into really serious plays and actually did drama.
Mm.
Uh and I kind of went into undergrad with the still a bit of the like the plan B. So I majored in um film studies. It was under the communications department, but it was a film studies. I kind of like made my own major with film editing, and then a minor in creative writing. Luckily, they had opened, because I thought about it in terms of, if I don't make it as an actor, what could I be almost as happy doing with my life?
Yeah.
And it was film editing, and it was writing, basically being a filmmaker, being on the other side of the camera. So that's what I went into formally for my major. But luckily, the university that I went to, unlike a lot of universities, you didn't have to be a theater major, a BFA major candidate to audition for the plays. Obviously, they had preferential treatment, but anybody could
Mhm.
audition and anybody could potentially be cast. And they were doing a production of Angels in America, Part One, Millennium Approaches, the Tony Kushner
Mm.
masterpiece, Fantasia, and I auditioned for the role of Joe Pitt, one of the leads and arguably the most complicated character in particularly in part one. He kind of takes a little bit of a back seat in Perestroika part two, but um I got the part, and it was one of the biggest, I mean, most life-changing baptisms by fire, because I still had not had any formal acting training, and I had this huge part in this really, really intense, demanding play,
Mm.
and felt a lot of pressure. And the director was basically giving me acting lessons on the fly, like teaching me basic acting, 101. Like, I had my
Yeah.
instincts and I had raw talent, or whatever you want to call it, but I didn't have any, voice and speech, other than my singing, and I didn't have any way to like really tap into um the emotional states that I needed to go. I didn't know how to break down a script and things like that. It was kind of just little things that I picked up here and there I was trying to incorporate. But I mean, and it's a long play. It's a big play, and the character goes on such a journey. And I'll
Yeah.
never forget, probably the best, again, another crossroads moment, but some of the best acting, probably the best lesson that I ever received, definitely up until that point. Obviously, going to drama school after I graduated, you get them all the time, every single day. But this one was when we were in a rehearsal, and it was myself, it was one other actor, uh, and it was the director and the assistant director behind the table, and I was having so much trouble just cracking this scene. I just couldn't. It was all surface,
Mm.
for me, and the other actor was, and I was a freshman in college, and he, or no, I wasn't a no, I think it was a sophomore or junior. But this other actor was like, he was a senior, he was a BFA, about to graduate with a BFA, like he was all 4 years was theater,
Mm.
and I felt so bad for him because I was so green and I felt like I was failing. And we tried it a bunch of times, and it just wasn't working. And the director, after, I don't know, 10 times of like trying to really, like, you got to get to him saying, Steven, it's not too late. And me saying, what, Josh, what do you mean? He's like, we're only two, 2 weeks into rehearsals. Like, it's not too late if you don't think you can do this. Like, we could recast, it'd be okay.
Yeah.
And there was something about him presenting it to me that way and laying down a gauntlet, like a challenge to me, that I was at this place where I'm like, Steven, this is really difficult. You could easily say, yeah, you know what? I think this might be a little much for me right now. Maybe I'll go back, do some more comedy, or,
Yeah.
I'll start a little smaller, or fuck you. I think I know that I can do this. I know it's going to take a whole lot more work than I've been putting in, but now you've challenged me. Now I've interpreted this as, even though he said it very nicely, you
Mm.
don't think I can do this. And so it became, I'm going to prove you wrong. And so you talk about like objectives, obviously, is the big, thing when it comes to acting, is what do you need? What do you what if you don't get this,
Yeah.
will be the disintegration of everything that you hold dear in your entire life, and all the stakes and everything. It was, I need to prove Josh Perlstein, the director, wrong. I need to show him that I can do this. And so I started like reading books about, like how to, what do I need to do? I really, really listened to him so hard. I really, I didn't, I kind of pulled back on the social aspect of like being in a play and theater,
Yeah.
and really, really focused on, and I think probably, my grades in my, because I was still going to class. This wasn't like, in the off season, during,
Yeah,
this,
yeah, yeah.
um, and I ended up, sticking with it, and doing and finishing the play, doing the entire run, and ending up winning a theater award, for best actor, at the for the university's theater department, at the
Fantastic.
end of that year. But it
Yeah.
was like, and still, I think back to it, now, and I'm like, oh, I was still, but the fact that that I stayed in that, and that it took something like somebody saying, I don't think you can do this, um,
Yeah.
was such an education of like, because I think that plays into my own insecurities of like, I didn't think, but hearing it from someone else, it triggered something in me, and again propelled me into this, like, I don't know for a fact, I can't see the future of what's gonna happen, but I really, really believe that I can handle this. And sticking with it and doing it, and then obviously the icing on a cake, getting that award and getting like nominated for a KCACTF, this theater festival thing that they do, that like the winners present scenes and monologues and stuff at the Kennedy Center.
Yeah.
I didn't end up winning that, but I was still went to the, went and competed, because of that performance, the strength of that performance. And I think that uh, if I had said to myself and said to the director, gone the other way and said, I don't, yeah, you know what? You're better off. I'm so sorry to, to Eddie, who was my scene partner. Like, yeah, I'm not giving you what you need. And I just don't have what it takes for this play right now. I don't know where I'd be right now. I don't know. I don't know if I
Mm.
would have come back. So that
Yeah.
was, probably the biggest, and then sent me into, this is really what I want to do with my life. This is the true, it's only going to get harder because I know that, like I said, that was still on the fly. And I knew
Yeah.
that I needed formal education. And that was when, on the strength of that performance, and then I did a couple other plays there before I graduated, and was like, okay, now I begin saving up to move to New York, and which drama school do I want to apply to? Do I want to audition for? And what do I want to do? But knowing by the time I got out that this is definitely, nothing is more that I've encountered has been more difficult, but also
Yeah.
nothing has been ultimately more rewarding. And the height of third eye opening. I mean, I'm sure you've felt that too, where it's just like this connection of to a higher power through you and the audience. And
Yeah.
so that's the way I always I remind myself when I start to feel like, if there's that, inevitable downtime and lull, like think like that's nothing when I'm doing it, be it on a TV set or a movie set or in a theater, or even developing, like I was last week, like developing, working on a new play, or doing stuff. I'm a lifetime member of the Actors Studio and doing stuff there and working in session there. Uh, Nothing brings me more joy. Um, and so that's where I'm like, then
Yeah.
this is still what I'm meant to do.
That is so fascinating, and I love the fact that that moment of where you made the decision to take on this challenge and to rise above those doubts that others had put on you, and perhaps even doubts that were forming in your own mind about your own capabilities, and say, no, I'm gonna put in the work and do that. Would you say that now, I mean, moving on, in this day and age where you're at right now on your current projects and audiobooks as well, do you still have that sort? Do you get to that? Do you use that the same mentality of, I'm going to push through this challenge, I can take on this challenge? Do you feel that fire, now on these current projects?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's because I'm always looking, you're always looking for like something new. You want that constant stimulation.
Hmm.
It's daunting, and it can be scary to obviously do things that you've never done before, but ultimately it's like I'm constantly, um on a quest to, and it sounds so strange, but to prove myself wrong. So
Hmm.
like if I put in my head, which is always the default, is like, you're not going to be able to do that, and that's goes back to like the, early child and heredity,
Hmm.
of like that, those insecurities, which a lot of actors have, a lot of artists, a lot of people, of just like, you're not going to be able to do. But then, so it's almost like I have that director's voice in my head, and then that becomes the motivator of like, well, why not? Why couldn't I do this? And what then also, what's the worst that could happen if I don't, or if it doesn't turn out to be what I thought it would be, or
Yeah.
yeah. So it's like with audiobooks, I had never done that before. And I don't know if you want me to move into like how I got into audiobooks.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So I did a 3-year conservatory acting program at the Stella Adler Studio in New York City. And they put a very, very, in addition to obviously the imagination and the tenets of Stella Adler, and Stanislavski really in general,
Hmm.
is voice and speech, because she was all about size, and actors have to have that, you have to rise to the character, and because she came from a theater background, so they put a real emphasis on that, and their voice and speech program is fantastic. And so when I was in my third year, which is like the company year, the final year, there were, especially the second half of that year, second semester, they're really gearing you up for industry, like so now how do we best position you to have work as soon lined up as soon as you graduate.
Hmm.
Because like a lot of programs, like it's, other fields, professional fields, they have, job placement and things like that, or internships. and stuff like that to kind of, but with acting, it's a little trickier. There's apprenticeship programs and stuff like that. But so they were really great about getting us ready, uh because there's such an emphasis on the theater, that last year, about on camera and auditioning, and how auditioning is its own skill set in itself,
Mm.
and meeting industry people. And one of those, in different mediums, theater, television, film, but one of those was audiobooks, which I obviously knew Audible had existed because their ads were all over the subways and all over New York City, and Midtown, and Manhattan. But I'd never listened to an audio, but I mean, I'd done, the when I was little, like books on tape and stuff,
Yeah,
like Disney
yeah.
stuff. Um, but I always loved to read, and I just thought that that was so fascinating, and I was like, "Oh my god." So they had, one of their producers and a veteran, audiobook narrator come to our, school and do, like, a workshop for a few hours. And listening to, Mike Charzak, who, is still at, Audible. I think he's in a different, more senior, position now than he was, then. Um, just listening to him speak about, the audiobook industry, and what it entailed, and how they were, so excited about, these outgoing, acting students, and especially schools that put a real emphasis on voice and speech,
Mm.
that and just like, the vast amounts of the genres and characters that we could play, because when, once you take your face out of the equation,
Yeah.
the things that you can do. And I really started thinking about, oh my god, like, if I could narrate this book or that book, or I could, and obviously get paid for it, that would be amazing. um and then listening to their veteran, narrator, do a little bit of, like, on the fly copy, like, just like reading out the excerpts of books that I think she had done. I
Mm.
was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing." And so when they were asking for volunteers, like, "Oh, if anybody would like to come up," and I was like, my hand was the first one up. I was like, I really gotta," because again, I'm looking at a lot of these, um these people that they had come in, industry reps and stuff like that. It was like, "Oh, it's, take it easy. It's a mock audition. It's a mock interview." I was like, "There's no such thing. Like, I'm this is my basically my audition for this Audible producer. This is my audition for Audible.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna do this as much as I can, as best as I can." Obviously, this is still very new, but approaching this as if it were a monologue, any other kind of just written text that I would do at school.
Mm.
And so I did the best that I could while I was at while Mike was there, and got his card afterwards, and, reached out to him pretty soon after, I think like a day or two afterwards, and he obviously remembered me and brought me in for an audition. Well, they sent me 3 pieces of, excerpts from different genres, because he
Mm.
remembered my voice, from when I, done the little exercises in the workshop, uh, and said that it's like you have this youthful exuberance, but your voice is also kind of low, so you have this gravitas, and so, they're like casting directors. He's like, you could play, you could do nonfiction, about big data, or you could do
Yeah.
sci-fi, or you could do young adult. So I came into their headquarters in Newark. It was probably like maybe just 3 weeks or so after that workshop. And audition. I had prepped these things again as best I could, and it
Mm.
was just me in the booth with Mike on the other side of the glass, and him just giving me some tips as I went along, and ultimately basically hired me that day. And
Wow.
I think I had, within maybe a week, I had my first, book. I was hired for my first book, which was The Reluctant Entrepreneur. That was a nonfiction about, like, building your business from $1 to $1,000,000. Um, and then after that, it went to a, like, coming of age, type,
Yeah.
like, young adult novel, and then, a sci-fi. It was like bing, bing, bing. Uh, and I loved it. I love the fact that it was so different, and you know, I listen to those titles now, and it's total cringe. I wish, especially Reluctant Entrepreneur, like I really wish that I could go back and do it again. But again, you
Yeah.
don't, you know, I didn't. It was just so I know more. I know
Yeah.
so much more now, because the big thing that I can hear in those three is the tension. And I know that I know that I was very, very nervous about doing those first few books, but then you just kind of like fall into I did a lot more listening to audiobooks. Because that is what you know, I tell people who are interested. I'm like, the best thing that I did was find a book that you know, that you really, really love. Maybe it could be a book that you could potentially be you could be cast to
Mm.
do it, or no, but it's just a book that you really, really love, that in hard copy, in print form. Find the audiobook and buy it and listen, and while reading along, and just seeing how this person, hopefully, you know, again,
Yeah.
they're a really good narrator. You see their cadence, you see how their pacing, you see how they uh you know, how they make it, acting, how they make it a performance,
Mm.
and how they keep it riveting over, you know, potentially hundreds and hundreds of pages. Um, and I'll just that was one of the best exercises of like just silently reading. Oh my God, that's how, and
Yeah.
doing that enough in different genres. Um, because I've done that for, I have screenplays, and every once in a while, you know, I don't do it as much now as I used to, but I'll put on a movie and I'll read the screenplay
Yes.
while,
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
silently while the movie's going on. You get to see, oh, that's how they, you know, and you get to just see the importance of actions and tactics and all those acting buzzwords and stuff like that. But especially with audiobooks, how they just bring it alive, because it is essentially, unless you're doing a multicast or a, you know, a duet
Yeah.
narration, it's a monologue. It's just an oration. You're just sitting there, and you're doing all the parts. You're doing everything. Um, and
Yeah.
how do you make something, you know, a draw, if you're doing nonfiction, how do you make that really, really interesting? How do you make somebody like really compelled to want to listen and want to learn from you for potentially 30 hours? You know what I mean? A lot of
Yeah.
these books are really long.
In those first few audiobook projects, was there an aspect that you found more challenging, maybe something that you'd never sort of considered to be challenging, or considered even a thing when first starting out? Was there anything that sort of springs to mind and you kind of think, oh, I really struggled with that. That was something that I had to work on.
I think the biggest thing was reading out loud for extended periods of time.
Hmm.
I think that that's something that a lot of people, when you're new, and there are great videos, like whenever any, because there are a lot of people, I'm sure, like with you too, like they're very interested, actors in getting into this industry. I think maybe they feel that it's easy, that
Yes.
it's like, you know, oh, well, you're just reading out loud. But that's like the conversation of like, oh, well, what is acting? You just got, especially if it's film, you're sitting in the, you know, it's so, I'm like, no, it's not. It's just, you watch people who are so fucking good at it.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
make it seem like it's easy, but it's not, or they've been doing it for so long that it's second nature to them. So I think with me, it was both, like I said, a blessing and a curse to get the first book, after being hired as a nonfiction about entrepreneurship. You know, it wasn't even
Yeah.
something that was, you know, like I said, if it had been about sharks, or, you know, oh, well, I wanted to be a marine biologist, or baseball, or,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
or tornadoes and storm clouds. This was something that I was like, I don't really care. But like a lot of, like, how do I invest myself in this to make it this, because it has to really appeal to you first.
Hmm.
And how do you make that, because if you seem bored, then the listener's going to be bored, and then be like, this is robotic.
Hmm.
I think the first part was, okay, let me break this down as if we're a and find the things that are really interesting, and then gradually just, after after I read through the book, you start to really feel, especially I lucked out because this book was written in first person because the particular author, I think his name was Michael Masterson. That's like what he does is he helps businesses build from small to and really take
Yeah,
off
yeah.
into multi-million dollar. So that really helped. And even to this day, when things are written in first person, it really it makes it so much easier when it's I. And so I remember that when I was working on it by myself, preparing, you start to feel like, yeah, I have done this. And there was like this confidence, and you start to feel like I am this guy. I have done this. I, Steven, have done these things, and you need me to teach you how to do these things so that you can succeed and have the big houses and the luxury cars and the sweet life. So I'd done all of
Yeah.
that, and I was like, "Oh, this is great." But then sitting in that booth for the first time, I mean, basically the whole duration of as many sessions as it took to record, and remembering that, like, this isn't 30 minutes at a time. This is like 4 or 5 hours. I mean, excuse me, you could take breaks here and there and for water and stuff like that, but you're gonna sit here and you have this amount of time because there's a deadline, that you have to finish this book, and trying to sustain, that was when the physical, the technical training really kicked in. Because again, I'm not, it's not like I'm doing, Shakespeare in the Park and
Yeah.
I'm unmiked where it's like that is its own, set of skills where you have to like reach the back row outside, but still make it seem like you're not shouting everything and still make it natural. This was like, so self-contained because obviously you're speaking at the level that you would be if you were just having a conversation at a restaurant about with your best friend,
Mm.
trying to help them build their business, but getting the breath right, getting the pacing, not like making sure that the relaxation was there. All those things that I had learned over those 3 years at Adler at the conservatory
Yeah.
came into play, and I'm like, if I didn't have that training, I would not be able to do this. Because it's and even now, uh, I'll be in the booth and I'll be, recording for 4 hours or something, and I'll get out and I'll just be like, "Why am I so tired?" Because you really think about it, you're like, "Yeah, I'm not," it's not like I mean, and it pisses me off, but, like, I hear construction, like, outside, and I'm like, "These guys are in these thick coveralls, and they're jackhammering, and they're tarring, and it's hot, and all this physical labor, like, that's a job where
Yeah.
they should be tired." I'm sure that they've just fall into bed, at the end of the day, but, like, so I think, like, "What am I doing? I'm just sitting in a chair." I'll, ask my wife, I'll be like, why do I feel like going to bed at 9 o'clock?" And it's because I am utilizing there's things that you don't even realize that I'm making sure my posture, my relaxation, the concentration of, obviously making this consistently compelling and interesting and constantly engaged. And obviously I'm staring at an iPad. So even though I have the
Yeah,
blue
yeah,
light
yeah.
filter and all to make it as easy on my eyes as possible, that level of concentration, it's just my brain is working, overtime, is working really,
Mhm.
really hard. So even though physically, maybe I'm not there are a few obviously times where I'm gesturing big, but it's all from a seated position, but I leave and I'm like, "Oof." Because and then you never know, you could be doing a scene where you're having this vicious argument between a married couple, and then
Yeah.
you're making up, or, you're having this really emotional, um what did I do? Oh, yeah, the book that I'm working on now, uh, it was a character when you really, really find a character that is so similar to you, like I was saying before, like, I've always battled with, um, serious anxiety and depression, and have been, in therapy since I was in eighth grade, since basically 13. And it's been a constant, struggle. And so when you come across a character that's going through those same things, it really like it really strikes you. And there was a character in this book that was trying to admit to his partner that, like, I feel like I need help. I feel like I keep this happy, upbeat
Mm.
front. And the other character actually hates him for it. They're the two guys that are kind of like, they're falling in love, but one character is this grumpy, like, why is he always happy? And then they finally had this real conversation where he's like, I'm not just this foolishly, you know, blissfully oblivious, ignorant, like, oh, everything's
Mm.
happy, and it's not it's something that I'm doing to protect myself, because underneath I'm so.
Mm.
And that conversation, like, but that was after I got through that, and it was only maybe, um I don't know, 10 or 15 pages. But yeah, I had to take a break, because you're just
Mm.
like, not only is it emotionally taxing to be that, uh to be the character that's admitting all these things about himself, but then you have to immediately switch to the other
Yeah.
and be a character that's like, maybe he doesn't care so much. Like, why is he telling me this? And so to have to go back and forth and backwards, like, I'm trying to open up to you about my problem. Yeah, but I'm okay. And having to switch that, it's like, that's why you walk out of the booth and you're like, oh, I just want to veg out on the couch now.
I know exactly what you mean. I think you really do put yourself through the ringer because you're really feeling it and you're really in that zone. And and for all intents and purposes, if you're narrating an argument, you might as well have just had a big blazing row. Like, your body doesn't know the difference. Then I always find myself, like, when I come out of the booth, I always think, okay, just settle down a little bit now, just make sure, sort of reminding myself that there isn't actually this horrific thing that's happening to us. That was a character, you know. Like, I think
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
yeah, I've, done that, or it gets like, really, really, obviously, working in romance as much as I do, it gets really
yeah,
steamy,
yes,
and things like that. So you're doing that, and then it's always so funny. And I've had, like, when I've done interviews or when I've talked to people about, um, because inevitably the question comes up, like, oh, what's it like to do, sex scenes and things. I said,
yeah,
well, first of all, on the surface of it, it's hilarious to me, because, like we were just saying, yeah, there's the emotional, roller coaster of having an argument, or having, a breakup or a confrontation. But when you're on the roller coaster of having sex with someone, and it's just you, um it's so funny. And but obviously, unless it's written funny, it's not funny
no,
ultimately in the delivery. It's, you got to, obviously,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
very
yeah,
serious, but you do take the breaks. But I said, what's always really, one of the funniest things is when, when it gets really intense, and especially if it's a, extended kind of scene where there's like the real build up, and then the climax, and then the come down,
yeah.
that I have this glass window in my in my booth. I have one on my right side, and I have one on the door behind me. And when I finish and I turn and I see that it's completely steamed up, there's like this, like, oh my God. It's just like, wow, I might as well have actually done that in this room, in this little box. It's almost like that's the mark of, okay, I think if I just steamed up
Yeah,
this glass, I probably did a pretty good job.
yeah. You committed to that.
The listener's gonna like this one. Yeah. I always can get, gauge, like, oh, that was only half steamed. No, I got to go back and do it again. Or,
Yeah,
um, but again,
that's
it's, you never know. And in a lot of these books, like I said, it's in a 4-hour session. It's like, yeah, there's one chapter where the characters are fighting. Um, and because a lot of contemporary romances are written dual, so you alternate with your, usually a co-narrator. Sometimes you do a chapter where we had a huge fight and it was a blowout, and then there's the other person's chapter, which is where in that chapter they inevitably fix the problem.
Hmm.
And so then you come back and now you're best friends, or you're romantically you're getting married if it's towards the end of the book, if it's a
Yeah.
happy ending. Um or you're having sex and you're like, wow, we were just fighting and now or there's somebody got murdered, or somebody's, we found somebody in a trunk, or there's another huge betrayal. And
Yeah.
um yeah, and you never and that's one of the things that I love. And I think they said, a few people said this at APAC, because it's the thing that um I feel like as actors is just manna from heaven, uh is that with voiceover you can play anything.
Hmm.
There obviously is, there is a type, there is a, be it animation or or audiobooks or any kind of, like, voiceover, even in commercials, like there's a, this is what, this person does well. And you're not gonna, you're not gonna have so and so do, like brooding romance, like they just their voice just isn't pitched that way. They'd have to really drop it down to an unnatural kind of place. But for the most part, I mean, I just did this like big mythical um epic
Hmm.
where it was, I'm playing this, like, this guy who washed up in a river. It's like this Arthurian kind of legend thing, where this woman in the water like saved him and gave him a quest, and so he goes on this quest through this mythical so I'm playing, like, this hero with half his face scarred, riding a horse through these woods of mists and Avalon and things like that. And then
Yeah.
I'm playing, like monsters. I'm doing the voice of, I'm having a conversation where it's the female fae, which is like a kind of fairy princess, my character, and then a goblin, and then this hag who lives on a bloody stump, and then there's this monster with three heads. One's a bird, one's a scorpion, another's a person. And it's like, that's where you really obviously take it very, very seriously, because in the world of these characters, it's life or death. But I leave and I'm like, this is where I feel like a little kid. This is where you
Yeah.
feel like going all the way back to when, your parents or your teachers or whoever, or even you, were like actually reading out loud when you still did that, when you were learning, and
Hmm.
showing the picture, or reading those young adult, like Choose Your Own Adventure, or The Lord of the Rings when you were little, and things like that. And you're like, oh my God, I'm back to doing this, and this is how I'm making my living. It's pretty cool. It's pretty magical.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. So after a a steamy session in the booth, or after being on stage or working on TV and film, when you're not doing those things, what do you most, what can we find you up to most often, to in your downtime?
I really like to travel.
Mm.
I didn't do that really all so much because of obviously financial reasons, and just, I needed to, make my way in the world.
Mm.
But since meeting my wife, who we met about 10 years ago doing a play, and because of her upbringing of being the child of people who worked in the Foreign Service and the State Department, she was all over the world. She had this real wanderlust that I was kind of in a place of like, yeah, it'd be nice to go someday. Um,
Yeah.
and it kind of like, and she was always like, yeah, we need to try, but it wasn't just like it wasn't that way. It wasn't like that kind of wistful, yeah. So it was, well, when do you want? When, like, we got to set a date. And where do you want to go? And this, and what do you want to do? Um, so we started having conversations like that pretty early on, and then I booked a play. I did a tour of a drama called Hikobai in Japan, which is all about the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami in 2011, and
Yeah.
I did like 9 different cities, all up and down Japan on some of the smaller
Wow.
islands. And then, and I'd never, the farthest I like my, I'd been to Puerto Rico and I'd been to Canada, which are very, I mean, Puerto Rico it did kind of feel like a foreign country, even though it's, it's
Mm.
basically the United States. And Canada, the same way. We went to Old Montreal, um, and eh, some of the parts felt like, okay, this is the cobblestone and the accord. Like this feels like we're in a different country. But again, it was basically the United States, just nicer,
Yeah.
cleaner. But I had never, and so to go from that to the other to basically as far, on the other side of the world before you start coming back again. um it was mind blowing, and to be doing theater over there, and especially theater like that, this was in 2013, so this was, only a couple years, like they were still rebuilding, and they're still rebuilding after the, especially the Fukushima, the nuclear plant,
Mm.
all that stuff, and the fallout. And um so it was just, that was one of those, like, I again reminded of why I love what I do, when you see that human element and what these stories mean to people, but also just the adventure of going to the other side of the world, to this culture where again, like, going to Puerto Rico, because I had 4 years of Spanish in middle school and high school. Like I could get by. Most people spoke English and things like that, but I could read the signs even when we went off the beaten path. Canada, like all those Latin based, those romance languages, um you can kind of, you can figure out basically what, they're all kind of the same. They're very, very similar to English. There's a connection to it. But to go to Japan, where it's kanji and those characters, and there's no frame of reference that I had, and having to, because my character was a doctor, like an intern. He was an intern at one of the hospitals in the Northeast prefecture, the Tohoku region, which was hit
Yeah.
the hardest by the tsunami and the earthquake. Um, I had to learn Japanese. I had to do like a crash course, because like I'm working in a Japanese hospital, having to give people advice, and so it's about like 65-70% of my lines were in Japanese. And you start to learn, like, having to retrain my brain to work in a way that I'm like, no, this is not Spanish, where yes, some of the words are basically the same in English, or even I studied Italian for a couple years. Like, this was completely new. But that kind of harkens back to what I was saying, where I was like, what the hell am I doing? How am I gonna, like, maybe if this were Spanish, or did it like something that I have a rudimentary knowledge of, but this is how am I gonna do this? And I ended up doing it. It's like amazing when you can surprise yourself in that way. But going over there, and that sense of adventure was like, okay, I got to do this again. So then coming back, and obviously then setting a goal, like saving up and traveling to Europe I had never been to. And so doing all of that was great. Obviously, that's not something that I do all the time, but that's something that I
Yeah.
usually, I try to look forward to, like once a year, or maybe once every 2 years. We'll go on a really amazing trip. Um, I really do like to read in my spare time. I don't read romance recreationally, uh, but I think that's just because I'm exposed to it so on such a regular basis in my professional career.
Yeah.
I really like going to the gym, being outdoors. I have a dog that we got back in October, so that's been a lot of fun, taking care of her.
Yeah.
Yeah, just being, I mean, New York City, the museums, and I love going to movies, especially like classic films, or like those special screenings of, see Clockwork Orange on the big screen, or Paper
Yeah.
Moon, or King Kong, even like things like that. I like to take advantage of that, and the museums in New York, and the theater, and just it's one of those when I get down on the city about mostly because of how expensive it is. Just that things are so at your fingertips that nowhere else could you go and do all these different things so easily. Uh,
Yeah.
going to see, Vivaldi's Four Seasons in a church on the Upper West Side by candlelight. Like just "Hey, you want to go do this? It's $20. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I always have to remind myself like, wow, this place really is fascinating. It's
Yeah.
complicated, but it's fascinating.
Yeah. It's not known as the best city in the world for nothing.
Exactly, exactly. No, there's a lot of truth to it. Yeah, it's not perfect, and obviously, I always, have the conversation with my wife about like I think I have to not think of New York as this organism, even though it's hard not to, because there is such an electricity and a vitality to it. You're like, it's just built, it's land.
Yeah.
It's just a landmass. It's building and things like that. It has no, but when, but again, when things are going really well, oh, I heart New York and New York hearts me. And then when it's not going well, you're like, fuck you, then you get into like the tough, fuck you, you fucking fuck.
Yeah.
And you're like, I can't wait to fucking get out of this place. But you have these moments, even if it's just something as simple as where we live is in Astoria, so it's right over the East River, part of Queens in Long Island City. We live
Hmm.
right by the river, and sometimes, I'll just be like running and coming back, you can see the skyline, and if I catch it at sunset, it takes your breath away, and you're like, oh man,
Hmm.
something so simple, especially now that the weather's getting nicer.
Yeah.
See more people out and see more smiles, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's a gorgeous city. What's the best place for our audience to keep up with you online? Have you got any, have you got what's your preferred social media or hangout space?
I mean, I'm on Instagram. It's at peanut butter and ketchup is my
I love that.
I started on Instagram to I wanted to kind of keep that very small. So I was like, no, I won't go Steven Dexter. I'll make it kind of obscure, maybe make it hard to, even though you type it in, that's what comes up. You type in my name. But I've started to grow my following on there. I'm on Facebook. If you go to just Steven Dexter, Stephen, or Steven Dexter actor, I'm on there. And then I have stevendexter.com is my website where I'm pretty pretty good about like keeping
Mm.
up to date the the goings on
Yeah.
and stuff as projects come out. And then just on Audible, my all my titles are there. Uh, I really have been trying to. I have a TikTok profile, but I have not ticked nor talked yet. I'm trying to figure out the best, like what would be the most interesting and what would be the most fun
Yeah.
uh for me to kind of do on a regular basis. So stay tuned, but there probably will be some ticking and talking
Oh,
in
that
the
is
near future.
exciting.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm like I can do things easily from the booth. I have a dog. Like there's a lot of interesting things that would be fun. And not just feel like I gotta do another video today.
Yeah.
And not just something that will keep me like glued to my phone or my computer, but something like, oh, this is something I like to share with people.
I'd love to end the show by just simply asking if you have any upcoming projects. I know you've mentioned a few just before we were recording. If you have any upcoming projects that you're excited about that perhaps we can look forward to.
Uh, as of right now, I mean, I'm working on writing my first feature length screenplay.
Nice.
So that's something that, it'll be a little while before obviously anybody can there'll be something to see.
Yeah.
But that's been, again, one of those. I did a short film called American Morning that won a few awards, and we were very fortunate that had made quite an impact on our audiences when we were on the festival circuit in 21 and 22,
Yeah.
which can be seen on Venmo or not Vimeo. Oh God, Vimeo.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, it's on Vimeo. You can just type in American Morning and watch the full film there. but it deals with like mass shootings and gun violence
Mm,
in America, because that's an issue that um I'm a strong advocate for common sense gun control,
mm,
because of the problems, severe problems that we have here that no other developed country has. And
mm.
so that's something that's out there now for people to see. And then, the audiobooks, and then it's constant. I mean, like you can I could get something today. It's just, for the most part, it's been the audiobooks. There's constantly stuff coming out there, which is always obviously on Audible, and things available for pre-order.
Mm.
And then things just in development, things that I'm fortunate enough to work on, but nothing that's going to be out to the mass populace in the near future.
Okay.
But yeah, but there's
Yeah.
always stuff, all the irons in the fire.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic there, and especially the screenplay. And obviously, congratulations on the short film and things. I mean, that's amazing. What I'll make sure is that, if it's okay with you, of course, that I'll make sure that the Vimeo link is in the description, front and center, so folks can have easy access and check that out. But yeah, that just about brings us to a close for this episode of the Audiobook Club. As I say, all of the links to Stephen's social media, website, and everything that's mentioned will be linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in. And of course, Stephen, a huge, huge, huge thank you to you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone else for listening. This has been a lot of fun.
Frustrated by the royalty rates for your audiobook? Annoyed that when the digital distributors say 70% royalties, they actually mean 70% of 50% or 80% of 70%, neither of which is an actual 70%. Wishing there was a way to cut out the middleman? Yet, you want your audiobook listeners to have a smooth and positive experience, and a direct download sale from your website won't deliver that. We at Pro Audio Voices hear you. Out of our commitment to our author clients, we've created Amplify, a program that provides an actual 65% of the sales price that you set, that gives you access to your customers' names and emails so you can reconnect with them, and keeps you in the driver's seat. Check it out at proaudiovoices.com. You'll find Amplify in the marketing menu.